Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it was sent to me by one of our admins, and the message, it reads like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? My brother, I have come here on your platform because I just want to tell you all the things that I did. So I came here to South Africa. This was in the year 2006. I first came here, then I returned back home. And when I came back, now I was coming under our church as if I was coming to do some missionary work here in South Africa. So whilst I was doing this missionary work, that was when I came across this other man. So this man, he was also from Zim, but he was the pastor at this other assembly that I was now working at as a missionary pastor as well, but I was still like a junior pastor. This man at that time, he was driving a very beautiful Mercedes Benz. That was when they came this other car, a very beautiful one that is called a Hammer. That is when it came into South Africa. And at that time, it was somewhere around 2007, and it was mostly driven by rich people like you guys, the ones that only had money. So when that pastor started driving this beautiful car, then I asked him how was it possible that he had so many cars, because at his home it is not like he did not have other cars. He had about 20 cars that he had, and all of them, they were like your luxury vehicles, those ones that show a lot of petrol. And this guy, he did not even worry, like if he was driving maybe from Cape Town going to Musina, the guy will just be filling up the full tank. When it just drops a little bit, then he would go and fill up to the full tank. He never drove a car until it was half a tank. He always wanted to see that gauge at full percent. He always wanted to see that gauge at full tank. This guy, even though he was just a pastor, but we never knew where he was getting all of this money from, because in our church, if you are a pastor, the only money that you can get is firstly your salary, and then there is this other money that you get, and maybe some of the people that will be at your assembly, those people, when they give you like your love offering, but it is not a lot of money. So there was this other time, it was a big Sunday, then this pastor, he gave a sermon and he was teaching us about the blessings of the Holy Spirit. He then told us that it is not possible for the Holy Spirit to stay in a home whereby there is poverty. He said that poverty is nothing but a demonic spirit. He asked us a very important question, and he said, if poverty is a demon, do we all agree that there is the spirit of poverty? We then said, yes, indeed, poverty is a spirit that comes straight from hell. He then said that, well, if poverty is a demon and you will be speaking in tongues, can a demon live in the same house with the Holy Spirit? And he said, if you are poor, if you do not drive a car, if you keep on wearing the same shoes to church each and every Sunday, you return back to church wearing those same type of shoes throughout the year, then you know that when you speak in tongues, those are not real tongues, but they are the tongues of the devil. Because when you are a rich man, then you know that you are indeed a child of God. For the Holy Spirit cannot be in a home whereby the spirit of poverty will be ruling. He told us that we needed to pray for our cars. We then went on a fasting period as we were praying for the Holy Spirit to bless us. He told us that we had to go on a fasting period whereby we will be asking God to bless us with the cars of our dreams, and to invite like the real Holy Spirit, like the Holy Spirit into our lives. And this is what we did. And when we were fasting and praying, I then spoke with the pastor one day when we were on one of our long distance journeys going to this other assembly. So I asked him and I said, man of God, I have been praying for a very long time, and in my diary I wrote all the things that you said on that day when you were preaching and giving us that sermon. And he said, indeed, he remembered. Then this man said, do not worry, keep on praying and keep on fasting. I want you to go on a fasting period whereby you are going to be fasting for at least about 2 weeks. And if you fast and if nothing happens in your life, then you should come back to me. I was filled with great joy after the man of God had told me that he had given me this grace period whereby I was going to fast, and if the Holy Spirit was not going to say anything to me, then he was going to get involved and to force the Holy Spirit to bless me like it had blessed him. I went on my fasting period. I fasted. This was for 2 good weeks whilst I was fasting. And when after those 2 weeks after I had completed my 2 weeks of fasting, unfortunately, there was nothing that came out of it. I was much more poorer because he had told me that I was supposed to give him some seed offering. One night, he called me since I was staying at the church. So he called me and I then went to his house. When I went to his house, this pastor, to my surprise, he was wearing, like, in our country, there are this type of clothes that are always worn by people that do traditional stuff, like those black garments, the long garments that they wear when they say that you have the spirit of your ancestors that is upon your life. Then I was surprised because I kept on asking myself, this was a man of God. I knew that he was a man of God. So how come was he dressed up in these traditional clothes that we know very well that they are worn by people whom are said to have the spirits of their ancestors possessing their bodies? Then this man, he invited me. As he invited me into his living room, to my surprise, this man, he actually handed me over this powdered tobacco that he was smoking, and he was actually sneezing. I then asked him why was he doing all of this stuff, because it was forbidden. Our church forbid us to do these things, to associate ourselves with people that do that stuff. And in the Bible, it is not allowed to call upon the spirits of our dead ancestors. But then the pastor laughed at me. He then said, follow me. I followed him to this other room. We went to that room. To my surprise, this was like his altar. In there were a lot of hunting spears, hunting knives, as well as this other bow and arrow, which he told me that all of these tools, they belonged to his great grandfather, and he had gotten them from Zim. The pastor then told me that the reason as to why he was a Christian and he was a pastor, it was all because of his wife, that he was a traditional man. Then I said, how do you handle this that you are doing? Because these are like opposing forces. So how do you manage? The pastor laughed at me and he said, when I am standing in front of the church, I just tell my ancestors that, please, whatever that I say, if I act as if I am against you, please forgive me, for I believe in you and I believe in you only. And I saw that the pastor was telling me the truth, because each and every time when you would be standing in front of the church, you will say a silent prayer. He said that each and every time when you'll be saying that silent prayer, you will be actually asking for forgiveness from his ancestors. Then you would continue lying to the whole congregation, and he does not even believe in Christianity. To him, Christianity offered him an opportunity to associate with other Christians that have money, some of them that assisted him to start his several businesses here in South Africa. But his true blessings, they were coming from his ancestors. He told me that most of the stuff that is written in the Bible, he does not believe in it anyway. He only pretends as if he believes in it. That is why he is so much blessed, because your Christians, they do not believe in a lot of stuff. That is why they ended up being poor like the way that they are. But the moment that you start to believe in your ancestors, there are some things that you end up doing. And it was all because of this man that I was able to achieve my success here in South Africa. It was because of this pastor who taught me how to communicate with my own ancestors, and my ancestors gifted me. I found myself being able to afford to buy that car that I loved, the car of my dreams, that Hummer. I bought it. It was a second hand, but it was still really beautiful. After I had bought that car, then there was a time when I had returned back home. Now that is the problem with our African religion, because when I returned back home, I was then told that my grandmother was not happy because we had laid a tombstone on top of my father's grave according to our tradition in Zim. So after I had done this, that was when I was told that the spirit of my grandmother was not happy, because her spirit was saying, why did you first lay a tombstone on top of your father's grave and not on my tombstone first? So she started to give me a lot of bad luck. And after that, there were some of my relatives who were also into this thing of worshipping ancestors. So what they will do is that they would go and place, like, those old coins, and they will place it on top of the person's grave. Then they would speak with that ancestor that will be lying on that grave. Then they would buy that spirit so that the spirit can come and fight with me. And when that thing started to happen, I then went to this other traditional healer so that I can strengthen myself. This is what happens when you are following some of these things. You keep on telling yourself that you need to strengthen yourself. You need to strengthen yourself. And when I went to that traditional healer, I was then given this other charm. That time, I was still trying to purchase my house, which is in Pretoria. So, Brother Nashi, what I did is that after I had made so much money, and I then took that charm when the guys were busy renovating, because I pulled the whole house to the ground, and then I buried that charm when they were laying the foundation again. I still have that house. It is there in Pretoria, but that house, no one can stay in that house, because I thought of it as my investment. I thought that I was going to rent it out, but no one is able to stay in that house because of the things that happen in that house, because I ended up killing my own wife. This was like many years later, and my 2 kids. So the ghost of my wife, the ghost of my 2 kids, they give anyone that tries to stay at that house a lot of problems. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that are following the African tradition. Yes, you can follow that tradition, but as for me, it caused me a lot of problems, and I ended up fighting against some of the people that were not even my enemies. I know that out there are some people that follow this religion, but what I can tell you is that the more that you go deeper into it, the more that you create enemies. And when you have created a lot of enemies, what will happen is that then you will need to go to some traditional healer who is going to give you some powers to strengthen you. And by the time that you would be strengthened, what is going to happen is that a sacrifice is going to be needed. I lost my wife, and I lost 2 of my kids. This was when I was fighting against one of my uncles who had his own tokologies. So since I was in communication with my ancestors, they revealed it to me that my uncle was an evil man who had these tokologies. So when I tried to go against him, that is when he punished me, and I went and I got these charms that ended up spilling the blood of my wife and the blood of my 2 kids. This is my own story, Brother Nashi. Yo, dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our brother right there. Strange things do happen in this world. Yo,